Hello, welcome to BodyMagick.
Ooh.
Today we have for you an extra special episode on empathy in the body. What do we mean by that?
Empathy being the ability to feel what others are feeling, in the body being in your own body.
Wow.
Profound.
Okay, so if you are an empathic person, or if you don't know that you're an empathic person, we're here to tell you you are an empathic person if you feel other people's stuff in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? It means that when this girl over here is feeling all kinds of things, I'm energetically linked to her, so I'm going to feel some of those things.
It gets dramatic.
Yeah. So part of the responsibility of being the empath is to then rid yourself of that energy, to not hold it and store it in your body.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know you're an empath, you don't know to do that. And so a lot of empaths have a really difficult journey with the body. Ailments they're not sure about, emotions that aren't theirs, that they don't know aren't theirs, all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ways that you can... Wow. Okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm a disgusting person.
Okay. I was gonna say there's there's a lot of ways that you can pick up on that kind of thing. So I feel like the term being an empath is a little bit more recent and a little bit more popular. But the idea of empathy is not. The idea of empathy, the principle of empathy having been around for ages and ages, it's just I feel like a lot more people these days are discovering that they actually have that ability within them. And I think that's beautiful. It's important. It's what progresses community, honestly. But as a tiny little sensitive human being, I was always told I was way too sensitive. Like, you don't need to be crying because you see that person crying on TV, or like you don't need to be tense because they're tense. They're all worked up. Like I was a really sensitive little kid, and I heard that all the time. And then the more that I heard that I was too sensitive, the more I would internalize that. It actually gave me a lot of problems. And it wasn't until I discovered what the idea of being empathic might be, and then further discovered how to work that kind of thing through my own body, that I realized that a lot of the pain that I was carrying around was not always mine. It was responsive. And that can be really detrimental when you're a sensitive person, especially if you work with other people. Like I work hands-on with people all day. It's really important for me to understand how to keep myself away from the trauma of others while still holding space for them to be there, and separate what I'm dealing with from what those people are dealing with. It's very, very intense sometimes.
Yeah, and that separation is really important to talk about, because there is a tendency for empaths to become victims, like victims of other people's energy. And it's really easy to do that because you're just like, that person's ugly, gross energy is near me, and it's making me feel terrible. Or you start to like accuse people of bringing that around you, and it's like they're just living their lives just like you are, right?
Yeah.
So, it's like anything else. When you have a special skill or ability, you have to develop it and you have to practice with it.
Definitely.
So part of how you do that in your body is stretching, or strengthening, consciously moving through the body, and recognizing those moments of purge and of release, and looking at those feelings and knowing when you own them and when you don't, like what, and being okay with owning your own stuff too, I guess, would be part of that.
Yeah.
But when this trauma comes up out of my body, was that my trauma at all, or was I holding it for someone else? Another part of that too is that for some people, particularly people who are empaths and healers, is that they will they'll take it from the people they love.
Some of us want to help the whole world.
Yeah. So you take it from the people you love and you process it because you're more experienced with it, or like whatever you want to justify. And most of the time it's unconscious, but then when you become conscious of it, you realize like, I'm taking this, like, so from a child, for instance, if you're a parent, you'll take that that pain, that suffering from that child, but then you're taking away their opportunity to learn how to process it themselves.
Right.
Or you're creating dependence on, without knowing it, you're creating someone else's dependence on you to process their feelings for them. So it's really important to be conscious of when you're doing that.
Right, and that can kind of feed into when we get into the idea of like archetypes and empaths and whatnot. That's sort of what feeds into that typical empath versus narcissist relationship. Is somebody who doesn't do their work themselves, giving everything to somebody who will do it because they love them, and it turns into this horrible dynamic. And it's really, really important to keep yourself safe from those situations, because it's just a hot mess if you don't. Yeah, and I think it can be confusing for people who don't necessarily understand their own empathy to hear the idea of carrying around someone else's trauma in your body. So I wanted to touch on that. For me, I am a mimicker. If somebody in front of me is like having a stressed out time and maybe they start twitching their hands or stimming a little bit, I might start doing the same kind of thing because it's just a reaction. It's like a mirror reaction. Or I can see somebody's like shoulders tensing up towards their ears. I have to very consciously work to not also bring myself into that space. And so when you're carrying around somebody else's trauma in your body, it can be from those sort of reactions. If you're with somebody who's very energetically explosive, it might cause you to want to tense in and protect yourself, and then you don't release that tension, and you're just carrying around that tension, and then you start to wear it around in the way that your body responds to everything else. So
that's a really good point about protection.
Yeah.
Like a lot of like an empath's like protection is to do this, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have someone who's like an energy vampire around you,
totally,
and you're just like, oh, no, you can't take anything from me, but that creates all of this tension here. Right. And then you have to, again, we talked about it in the energy healing video about like opening up.
Yeah, it's still part of my, part of the hardest stuff that I do in my daily practice is to open my chest and heart, because I'm so used to rolling myself forward. It's more comfortable for me to slouch and keep myself safe. So when I have to open up and out, it actually causes me pain, because a lot of the time, up until this point in my existence, I spent a lot of my time very tense this way. And that can be reflective of carrying around trauma that's not your own inside your body. And mentally, you have to kind of understand how to unravel what is and what isn't, and why it's safe and okay to let that go, and why you can put your chest forward and be confident and be heart forward, and know that you're still safe because you're keeping yourself safe.
Yeah, and I think on the weekend we did a spear and spiral with Kira, and she talked about how the way to healing trauma is the spiral. Like you don't go directly at it.
It's not linear. Yeah.
It's a spiral to get there. And I was just thinking of that that's what body work is before you go mental. I'm saying that the wrong way. But body work can be something that you do before you do the mental work of working through that trauma.
Right.
So before you do therapy or something like that, using the movements and understanding what's even coming up, and using that as an opportunity to sit with it. And there's all kinds of ways that metaphor comes up in how we hold something and how we release something physically in our movements.
Right.
So using that body language, because this is where your trauma is stored more than the mind. Right. The mind can dissociate. The mind can, while the mind, is a real thing. While the mind is like wandering off, to maybe a much better place, the body is still in the thick of it. The body is still massively experiencing that trauma.
And the body is the one thing you have that's inherently your own. Your mind, you can share space in your mind with other people. Other people can influence that, but you wear your body around. That is yours. And like I said earlier, muscle memory is a 100% real thing. And it doesn't make any sense if your body remembers and your mind remembers, why wouldn't you try to connect the two and see where that's coming from?
Yeah. Yeah, and we've talked about this before, about the language of the body, understanding, that when my belly does this. Okay, so a really good example of that is, and going back to the narcissist kind of, narcissist empath trope. Sometimes butterflies in your stomach signal fear.
Right.
So you're having a fear response to a person who is, you know, if you have a pattern of attracting narcissists, you're having a fear response to this person, you mistake it for like, oh, it's butterflies, it's love, right? That we can misread those signals. Another thing I wanted to say about that too, though, is an empath and an empath having a relationship can be really tricky, because you're both constantly feeling each other. And so where you end and I begin can become a really tricky thing. And so again, the body work is going to help you both to know yourself physically.
For sure.
So that when you come into that shared space, you know that how different it feels in your own body versus their body, particularly when you get that close with someone.
And that kind of relationship isn't exclusive to romantic either. Like,
no.
You and I spend a lot of time together and often get the same gross headaches at the same gross time, and we'll be lethargic and laying in the middle of the floor or needing to scream in a tunnel, and who knows whose it is, but both of us have to deal with it. And it can be really intense when you are connected with a person so strongly. So that's why it's so important to do your body work and understand where in yourself you're existing and be able to separate that from all of a sudden I have this weird pain because I'm with somebody who's causing me weird pain and I don't know why.
Yes. We're kind of out of time.
Oh, snap.
So, we want to hear about your empath experiences. We want to hear from all of our fellow empaths, or if you have any questions about it, let us know. We would love to have people ask us questions so we can chat about it on Tea and Talk. So reach out. I don't know. I just heard reach out, that Marilyn Manson song.
Reach out and touch me.
Yeah, that one.
Personal Jesus.
Personal Jesus. Yes. Okay.
First.
No one here is promoting Marilyn Manson. Okay, bye.